Hi guys, welcome back to Scale Motor, and today we're going to be carrying on with our Trumpeter 1964 Ford Futura, and we're going to be focusing today on the interior and also doing some wiring for our working lights. To start off, we're just going to be modifying a couple of parts. So this is the dashboard, and there's it's molded obviously all as one piece, and then there's a flat bit of plastic backing where the decals for the dials and our instrument cluster would sit. What we're going to do, because we want to light these up, is we're going to remove that plastic. So for the two circular dials on the outside, all we're going to do is drill a hole somewhere near the center. The drill bit is much smaller than the actual circumference of the dial, so I think it's a 0.6mm drill bit. So we're just going to leave that hole in the middle for the time being, and then in the center where I believe the speedo sits, it's a bit of a weird shape. It's like a rectangle with flared edges, kind of wraps around the dials. So what we're going to do is we're just going to drill a hole in each corner, not right up to the corner, just close to the corner, leaving some of the scrap plastic, shall we say, overhanging. And then we're just going to come in with a hobby knife, join the holes up, and then we'll use the files then to remove the rest of that scrap plastic and get up to where we need to go. And then with the circular dials, all I've done is drilled a hole, and we're using the Tamiya round basic file. Just going to pop it in the hole, give it a twist, and just widen that hole until we've got it to the size we need. You can just get a drill bit the correct size and drill it out and be done. However, I find using the smaller drill bit first, you don't have to get it dead center and you don't have to worry about going off, and there's a bit more room for error, and that's what we ended up with. And now we're going to modify the front bumper. So there's two little position marker lights, I believe, on the front bumper here, and they're depicted straight out of the box with decals, some slightly orange decals. I wasn't a fan of this, so I decided we were going to light them up. So all I'm doing now is drilling 4 holes in each little kind of square, one in each corner, and then again we're going to use our craft knife just to join the holes up, and then we can tidy the edges with our files. What we'll do then is we'll use some UV curing resin to pop in there to use as a kind of lens, and then we'll colour that with clear orange, just so we get that orange tint. Now we're also working on our rear bumper, so I've just drilled 2 little holes in the top of the license plate recess, and I'm just going to join these holes up with the craft knife to make a little rectangle, and then we'll pop an LED in there, and we'll have a nice number plate light. We will be putting a custom number plate on as well, but I've had to just modify the back side of this bumper because there's a little space between the top kind of lip of the bumper and the top of the recess for the license plate, and our LED didn't fit in there, so we're just using our craft knife and again the Tamiya basic files just to widen this gap, just so we can fit our LED in. Just be careful, because I've kept the kit chrome on, so you want to watch out if you do that, because it's quite easy to slip, and if you slip you're scratching the chrome, and there's kind of no fixing it with the kit chrome. You'll have to strip it and repaint it. We did get a scratch or two, but it was behind where our license plate is going to sit, so it's easily coverable and not something I'm worried about. Okay, next up we're just making our lenses, I suppose, for our instrument cluster and our dials. All I've done is I've got some clear plastic. This is just some packaging. You'll find this stuff on like toys, just any kind of packaging which has got like a clear window on the box. It's great stuff. I always like to keep a sheet or two. So all we're doing is we're just going to cut a little rectangle out and make sure it fits in the back of the dashboard. And then what we'll do with this is we'll get another around the same size. I'm just using these little scissors to give it a trim it down to size so it's not too big. But yeah, we'll cut another piece the same size and we'll sandwich our decals in between this. And then once we add the LEDs, it should light the dials up nicely. And here we go with the decals. I've just popped them in warm water for 30 seconds to a minute, just until they start sliding around on the decal paper. And then all we're going to do is just pick them off and pop them on our clear plastic. Keep offering the plastic up to that dashboard piece just to make sure you've got the decals in the right place, because you'd hate to set them, put plastic over the top, and then realise your decals are squiff. So just take your time. As long as the decal is still wet with water, it should move nicely. And then you can just use a cotton bud then to kind of wick up the excess water, and you'll be good to go. I do apologise that I am out of frame every now and again in this video. I've recently got myself a new mount for my camera, so for the next video we will have a better camera angle where my hands will be coming from the bottom. Okay, and this is what we're using to glue these clear plastic pieces. It's the 5-second fix UV pen, suggested to me by Paul over at ISM. It's absolutely great. You can use it for many things. It dries absolutely clear and it's really quick setting. So all we do is we just put a tiny little blob on the clear plastic, and then we pop another piece of clear plastic over the top, and then it comes with this little blue LED you can see on the right hand side there. The case is blue, it's actually UV, and you just point the UV light at your glue for about 5 seconds, and it'll set, and you've got a nice bond, and it dries absolutely clear, which is great. So I'm going to be using it for lenses, as mentioned earlier. And now a part which many may find a little daunting, and it's just soldering. Now this soldering workstation is not necessary. It's a electronic kind of temperature controlled workstation. I got it from Maplin a while ago, which says a lot, but you can get cheaper options online. You can spend about £10 on a soldering iron, and while it's not great for everything, the cheaper ones will do this job, because you don't need it. Like, my one's a bit overkill. I've got it because I used to do other things. So yeah, don't worry, don't stress about it. If you don't want to solder, I suggest going to check out a video by Building on a Budget Models. I put a link down in the description. He recently made a video where he added lights to one of the silk-cut Jaguars he built, and he didn't solder anything, and he did an excellent job. So it's worth taking a look at that if you're not into soldering. But all we've got is some copper track PCB board, and all we're doing is we're going to be putting one leg of our LED through one of the holes, and then we're going to get our solder. We're using this kind of solderer's helper clamp kind of thing. These are great, really cheap. It did come with a magnifying glass, which I've unfortunately lost. That thing on the right there is just a solder sucker, so if you've got too much solder, you press the plunger down there and press the button, and it sucks it up and gets it out of the way. But all we've done first there is we just tinned the end of the soldering iron, just so the solder flows better. And I'm heating up the copper track and the leg from the LED at the same time. and then we're just going to put a little bit of solder on. And once everything is sufficiently heated, you should see that solder flow and make a nice solder joint. You don't want it to look like a blob. You don't want it to look like it's sitting on the surface. You want it to look like a kind of smooth, rampy effect. Because if it's a blob, you're not going to get a great connection, and it could just as easily snap, pop off, especially if you're moving it. So just watch out for that. So what we're going to be doing is, all I'm doing now is just heating it up again, just to make sure everything kind of flows nicely. And then we're going to move on to our second LED, and we're going to be adding the same leg. So each LED has a resistor attached, and we're just going to put all these, we're going to attach them all to the same track of our little copper track board. So we've got all of the same leg. I can't remember if it's the positive or the negative, the anode or the cathode at the moment. However, we're just going to make sure we've got the same legs on the same track, and then once we've done these legs, we're going to skip a track, move 2 across, and then do the other lead coming from the LED, again all on the same track. And then the gaps in between which we've left, we're going to add another wire, just a scrap piece of wire, doesn't really matter. And then we're going to bridge the 2 tracks. So we're going to bridge the second track with the first track, and then we're going to bridge the 4th track with the 3rd track. I'm probably overcomplicating this, so don't worry. I'll add some photos just so you can see exactly what it is that I mean. And you can probably see it there, those little L-shaped pieces of solder. I don't know why I done it that way. I think it's just because the way I cut the strip board, I cut it in such a way that I only left myself 4 holes. So, and we were using 4 LEDs on this one, so I needed that space next to it. And it keeps it kind of square rather than a long piece. But yeah, now we're just testing our connection, and it seems the connection is good. So we're going to be adding the other 2 to this little circuit, and this will be our front and rear light circuit. I was going to make all the lights on 2 separate circuits, and I did, but then I decided to join them all up because one 12-volt battery will run them all. Lovely. The battery and the LEDs are both from Amazon, and I'll pop a link to them down in the description. Just making sure we've got the polarity right, and we didn't, and now we do, and you can see that my solder joints are fine. It's not the best solder job because I haven't done it in years, but it'll do the job. And now we're on to priming. So I'm using the Ultimate Gloss Black primer from UMP Retail. It's my absolute favourite primer. I have left it as kind of a finished colour, depending on how, if you leave it dry or dry it with the airbrush, you get a different effect. And it's really versatile, and it's very forgiving, and it's a brilliant primer. Yeah, so we're just going to build it up like we normally would. We're just going to do a nice thin coat at first, just to make sure we've got coverage on the part, and then for our subsequent coats we're going to build it up. For the smaller pieces I only done 3 layers because it is quite easy to flood and lose some kind of surface detail, especially when we're adding paint on top of the primer. So for now it's just 3 coats on the small parts, and we went for 4 coats on the larger parts. I think we actually went for 5, and there's a reason I went a little bit further on the bigger parts, and that's just down to the texture I was looking to achieve. So the larger parts are of the interior and the roof, they are leather, and I wanted to make this car look used, but looked after. So I wanted to try and get a nice kind of cracked leather effect on the leather parts. So it was a bit of a happy accident, really. At one point I wasn't paying attention and I went a bit too thick in one area with the primer, and for some reason my first thought was, quick, dry that with the airbrush. So we started drying it with the airbrush and it left this kind of texture which was really, really cool. So then I decided to absolutely flood the parts and then dry them super quick with the airbrush, and you can see that it does leave a kind of cracked leather effect, which I think looks absolutely brilliant. So here we are, and this is that leather effect I was talking about, and it does look like aged leather. And what we're doing now is, you may have noticed we painted over our chrome pieces too. So this was just to kind of get a more kind of bit more depth. So what we've done is we painted over with the Ultimate Gloss Black primer, and then we've just got a cotton bud, and we've got a bit of X28 acrylic thinner, and we're just gently rubbing over the high points of this and the rear grille. And what this will do is it'll leave the black primer in the recesses and give the part a bit more depth. The grills were moulded all as one piece, and it would take an age to cut each of those little gaps out, so I decided to do it this way. You want to go a little gentle, don't go too hard, because what you will do is you'll end up pulling the paint up from in the recesses, and while that's not a problem, it's just slightly annoying to go back and paint and start again. So just take your time. The X28 does the job well. I would suggest UMP Retail's own airbrush thinner for this, just because it is formulated to work well with their stuff. But if you don't have that, X28 will work. And now we're just making sure we've got all of that paint out of our light, and then you can see it's left a nice kind of depth effect. Okay, next up we're using the Tamiya LP70 gloss aluminium. It's thinned between 60 and 70% with the Tamiya Lacquer thinner with retarder. And all we're using this for is we're just going to go over a couple of trim pieces with silver. My reasoning behind this was because I thought if I do a nice lacquer silver underneath, I can put my acrylic paint over the top, and much like the chrome parts, I can use a cotton bud to remove the acrylic paint and leave the silver underneath. There's many ways you can do it. You can mask off and paint afterwards, but there were quite a few little small bits I didn't really want to spend the time masking off, and I thought this would do the job adequately. You can also go over it with chrome pens, but again there were other larger bits which I didn't think I'd be able to get a nice finish with the chrome pens, so we went for this way, and yeah, it turned out not too bad. So the seats are going to be two-tone, and we're using the Ultimate White primer here for the white leather of the seats. So we're just going to start off as if it's a completely clean and painted part, and we're going to do a little kind of dusty coat to start off, and then we're going to completely cover the part with another dusty coat after this, and then we're going to be selective about where we paint. So we're going to get the white where we want it to go, so the centers of the seats. And then what I did is I used the white as a kind of highlight. So along the edges, I put a bit more white primer down, and like any recesses or kind of hidden areas, like where the seat meets the backrest, we left a bit darker. We left a bit of that black primer showing through. We done the same on the roof here. So the high points where the kind of supports are, we put a bit more white primer down just to give it a kind of artificial highlight. It looks a bit stark there, but we did go over with another kind of dusty coat just to tone it down a little. And I think this helps then when we add in the blue. kind of changes the colour ever so slightly. So now we've got the least fun part for me, which is masking. So I've just popped the tape on the back of my hand, pulled it off just to detack it slightly, and we're just going to cover the parts we want to keep white. So we're going completely over the parts, we're keeping white and just overlapping the edges, and then we're just going to push the tape down so we can see our recesses, and we're going to come in with a craft knife and just cut along these recesses. If you are going to do it this way, just be careful, because if you slip you're going to scratch through all your layers of paint. But if you've got a nice sharp knife and you're careful enough, you're not going to cause any kind of deep gouges or anything. So just take your time, and you should be fine. Just make sure you push the tape down hard so you can see those recesses. And there we have it. It's all masked up. All the bits that are gonna stay white are the bits with masking tape. Did miss a bit there, but we did go back in with a bit of masking tape and just cover that up. And now for the blue, we're using Tamiya X3, which is royal blue. Really nice colour. It's thinned with the Tamiya X28 acrylic thinner. Pardon me. It's thinned about 50-50. And we're just going to apply a nice light coat to start off. And then we're going to come in and build up the layers. And we also done the same as, well, kind of the opposite as what we did with our white. And on the darker areas, we put a bit more of the blue down, particularly on the roof, just again to give it that kind of fake shadow and just add a little bit of visual interest. And I think it turned out pretty well, if I do say so myself. Just slowly building up the first layer just to make sure we've got the coverage, getting in all the kind of corners, the nooks, the crannies. And here again, as mentioned, we're going with the roof, and we pay in particular attention to the middles of these kind of dips and the edges, just to give that kind of fake shadow. And you can see here that the higher parts are lighter. It looks a bit stark, but we did come over with another thin coat of the blue just to tone it all down. I was just moving it away and taking a look at it in the daylight coming through the window, just to kind of see the effect. Okay, next up we're going to be using our Alclad Chrome, one of my favourite paints to work with. It's unthinned, straight out of the bottle. We've lowered our pressure on our compressor, and what we've also done is I've tightened my trigger tension. I'm using the Ultimate Apex airbrush, again from UMP Retail, and the trigger tension is so easy to adjust. You just take the back off, and there's like a barrel screw around the needle chuck. Tighten that in for a tighter tension, loosen it out for a looser tension. It's probably the same with a lot of other airbrushes. But yeah, so the reason we're doing this is that Alclad likes to go on at a lower pressure in thinner coats. So the tighter trigger tension just kind of cheats our muscle memory into doing lighter coats. And you want to build them up slowly. If you do kind of hose it on and go a little quick, you can lose the shine which Alclad can give. So just take your time. For your first layer, you might not even see much of a difference. You'll just see the parts starting to shine a bit. But that's not a problem. Just build it up slow, and that's how I get the best results. And now is the fun part, which is peeling the masking tape off. I love it. So you can use your tweezers if you like. Just be careful if you do, because you don't want to scratch and gouge your very many layers of paint. And pull slowly, because even though we've detacked the tape, it is still possible to pull some of that paint up, which obviously we want to avoid. I can see at the bottom of the seat there, it was a little bit sloppy with my masking, and I didn't cut through enough. I was a little too gentle there, and it left a kind of feathery edge. But it's not a problem, because the Tamiya acrylic that we use brush paints really, really well. And once it was dry, I just come back in with a small brush and just touched up any areas like that. And then for the white, you can brush paint the UMP primer if you wish, but the white didn't really need much touch up with me. And there we go, there's our kind of leather effect. And just to push the leather effect a little bit further, this is a tip I read online, I can't remember where unfortunately, but all I'm doing is rubbing my fingers over the paint just to kind of knock a bit of the shine off. The oils in your skin do really help to kind of push back a bit of that shine, and it gives it a kind of satin feel. And obviously don't forget to throw your parts all around the bench just for some natural weathering. But we went over all of the leather bits with our thumb, and then this is us coming back in with a cotton bud with a tiny bit of the X28 thinner on, and we're just rubbing over the areas which we wanted the silver to show through. You just got to be a little bit careful when you're doing it. Don't push too hard, because your friction could then end up going through the silver paint underneath and back to the black primer, or even worse, the white plastic. So just gently, it may not look like anything's happening at first, but as long as you have a bit of thinner on that brush, it will start to cut through that blue, and the acrylic thinner will cut through the white as well. And it should leave your silver or whatever lacquer paint you've got underneath intact. And now we're just going to be coming in with our Tamiya black panel line accent colour. So as mentioned, I want to make this car look used, but also looked after. With it being an old car, so plenty of time for bits to wear, stuff to accumulate, shall we say. So I am putting quite a bit of this panel liner on, just to kind of simulate the age and the wear and tear it would see. So I'm putting quite a lot on in kind of all of the recessed areas, along any handles, door handles, kind of armrests and stuff, and we've done the same on the seats. We went quite heavy with our panel liner. And then what you can do then is you can come in with your cotton bud and start wiping slightly aggressively, and it will start to remove a lot of that from the high points. we've got a tiny bit of clipper lighter fluid on the cotton bud, and this will help pull away the panel liner, as you can see. You can use mineral spirits or enamel thinners to remove the wash, but the lighter fluid is what I had on hand, and it does work well. So we're just going aggressively over the white parts, not too aggressively. We just want to kind of take the panel liner off the higher parts and leave it in those recesses, and it will add a bit of visual interest and a nice bit of depth. And now it's just time to start putting things together. So the front kind of bench, the fit was really tight. I think it was down to all the layers of paint on the seats and the chassis. So once it was slid in place and pushed fully home, it didn't move. I could pick up the model by the seats, so we didn't bother with any glue on that because I didn't want to pull it off and scratch things. The back seats, I'm gonna not glue them in because I want them to be removable. But now we're just adding our pedals. They were individual pedals in the kit, which I think is really great. Just be careful because they will fit in any old pedal hole, but they do need to go a certain way. So just check your instructions because they are slightly different sizes. And to fix these in place, I'm using the Rocket Rapid CA gel. It's really good. It's quite versatile. I got it when I was building the RC213V because I was having issues with the super detail set wiring and the thinner super glue. It just wasn't cutting in the mustard. It wasn't holding, and the wires were falling off. So I tried a thicker glue, and this has been kind of my go-to. So yeah, it's really great for the detail sets. I will probably try some others like the Bob Smith Industries. I really wanted to try that, especially the kind of no fog one, so it could be used on clear parts. But with our UV curing resin kind of pen, 5-second fix pen we use in this video, I don't think I'm going to need any super glue for clear parts because that'll do the job nicely. Okay, and now we're just going to be adding our dials to our dashboard. And again, we're using this 5-second fix UV curing resin pen. It's a lot of words. And all we're doing is we're putting a little bit on our kind of clear plastic with our dials in earlier. We have coloured the back in black, just to kind of block out any excess light. And then we're just going to hit it with our UV light. I've done it a little longer than 5 seconds here, just because the back being coloured in, I wanted to make sure that the light got through. And then I did also flip the part over and go from the other side with the UV light, just to make sure we've cured all of that resin, just so nothing moves. And there we can see we've popped the door cards on now. They were super simple, just slid into place, and the dash is just resting there, and it hasn't been glued yet. So next up, a little bit of fun. These magazine covers were from Mr. Model. They offer various different sheets of magazine covers, and I got them from Hero Boy. It's printed onto photo paper, and you just cut out what it is you need. So to stick them on, we're using tacky glue from Hobbycraft. It's pretty much PVA, any kind of white glue will do. I'm just going to put a blob on and then stick our magazines down just so they don't go sliding about and we end up losing them. The magazines I've gone for are a Performance Ford magazine, because this is a Ford, and I guess we could call it gentleman's literature. That's all I'm going to say about it. You'll be able to see it in the photos at the end. So we just popped a little blob of glue down using a toothpick, and we're just going to push it down just so the glue spreads. And now we are just making a battery box. I started making this out of styrene, and yeah, I wasn't too impressed, so I decided to just use the plastic cover off the packaging from the batteries, because this is the right shape, the right size. What I've done off camera is I've added a switch to my wiring. It's super simple to add a switch. You just need to essentially break the wire from the positive side of the battery to the circuit and just pop the switch in there. There's various different switches you can get, so just kind of keep your eye out. A lot of them will have many different connectors on, so you know, some switches will have 6 kind of pins, so you just got to make sure you look at the pin out and find out which ones you need. This switch I kind of borrowed, shall we say, from a Bluetooth speaker, because I've got a million of them, and this one was never used. So I just borrowed the switch, and it was soldered onto the board of the Bluetooth speaker in such a way that it was super simple to find out how to wire it up in this circuit, because only 2 pins were used, so we just used the same pins. We've also soldered on some little kind of terminals, I suppose, for the batteries. All these are just metal plates from another one of these batteries, because they're just I think it's 6 little button cell batteries all stacked up with a metal case around, and then these metal plates on the end. So we just opened it up, and we took the plates off the end and soldered them on for our battery connections. I would say be careful though, don't just go ripping any battery open, because not all batteries are made the same way. A lot of them will have some nasty chemicals inside, so don't go ripping the battery open unless you know for certain how it's made. So now we are just sticking our LEDs on the back of our dashboard, and we use some of the UV 5-second fix. Super simple. Hold the LED in place, put a blob on, and because it dries clear, it'll hold it in place and it won't hinder our light. And then just to run our wires, we're just going to hold them along the edge and just put a dab of CA glue on. You can put a big chunk on. It doesn't really matter, because this part is going to be hidden anyway, and there's a small gap between the door cards and the door on the body, so the wires fit inside there lovely. And now we're just making something to hide our switch, so I decided to make a little tissue box to go onto the parcel shelf, which would act as our switch. So I did make one out of paper first. You can see it just off the side of the camera there, the grey thing under my my snippers. But all we're doing is we're cutting 3 blocks of just plain styrene. I believe it's 1.5mm styrene, and we're just going to use our Tamiya extra thin cement to glue them all together. We'll glue them together, give them a squeeze and let them dry, and then once they're dry, what we're going to do is we're going to come in with our Tamiya basic sanders, sorry, not sanders, our Tamiya files, and we're just going to give it a nice shape up. I made it bigger than I wanted it, just so we could shape it. So there was a lot of sanding to do. filing rather. So we filed down each side just to get it to the size we wanted, and then we used the file then just around the corners. What we did do, which isn't in the video, is we did drill a couple of holes in the top and then use our hobby knife to scrape it out essentially. And what this done is it's give us the oval on top, the opening on the tissue box, and then we did drill a slightly smaller hole in the bottom, which will sit on top of our switch. And now what we're doing is we're just going to make a hole for the switch. So we've got our tissue box here, and we're just going to scribe around the edges just so we know where it's going to sit on the other side, and we know our size. So we're going to be drilling out the parcel shelf. So we're using, again, I think it's a 0.6mm drill bit, and we're just going to drill 4 holes in a rectangle kind of configuration, because the switch is going to slide back and forth. So we've drilled the 4 holes, and then we're just going to connect them up as we normally would with our craft knife. And then we're going to use our files to just neaten it up. It is going to be hidden, but it would just be nice to neaten that up. I'm building the model so that the roof can be taken off, and we can put the piece switches on the bottom of the screen there, that blue kind of crescent shaped piece. That's to simulate the roof down. The only issue is, to do that we will have to remove the tissue box. So I just think that hole underneath where the switch is going to be seen, so that's why I decided to just neaten it up. The tape is on just so I don't slide the drill bit or the file and miss and scratch the part anywhere else. And all we're doing now is we've just got some normal A4 paper, and we're just going to cut out a little funnel shape, and we're going to use this as our tissue coming out the top of the tissue box. And all we're going to do is fold it into a little L shape, and then the flared bit at the top, we're just going to give this a little fold just to imitate the kind of ripples you'd see on a tissue. And there we have our little tissue box. We just used Sharpie just to give the kind of designs on the side. And now we fit the body just to make sure all the wires fit, and what we're going to be doing is just setting our switch. So we're just popping a bit of glue on the metal frame of the switch, making sure not to get any super glue on the slide-in part of the switch, because that'll be no good, it'll just be stuck in place. We're just going to pop it through the hole we drilled in our parcel shelf, and then just leave it dry, and job's a good one. So now all we're doing is we're adding our tissue box. I did glue this on at first, but then I realised it would have to be removed, so we did pop that off, which is not a problem. And here we can see that if you just give it a slide the right way, you can see that will turn our lights on. Apologies for the focus. Chuffed that it actually works. It's the first time I've wired up a model, and there's our dashboard there, and yeah, it worked. So all that's left now is the body. But I've thoroughly enjoyed it. So far it's my first road car, and it's been going really well. There's a couple of firsts in this for me. But if you're enjoying as much as I'm enjoying, please don't forget to subscribe to catch the last video, and leave a like and a comment just to let me know what was your favourite part. But in the meantime, thank you so much for watching. Have a great day and stay safe.